Good day. Today I have a very special guest for you. His name is Axél Carrasquillo. He is a lifelong shaman. He was born into a family of shamans. He travels all around the world teaching energy work and how to connect deeper with your intuitive, psychic, spiritual abilities, how to cultivate healing within yourself. He does a shamanic type of energy work called Antahai. And I am so pleased to be bringing him today because part of my mission with Ecstatic Self is to connect people specifically in the LGBTQ community with individuals who are connected to the community, part of the community, and also on a deep spiritual path. So over the last several weeks, you've seen me engaging with sex therapists, yoga teachers, spiritual counselors, and this is going to be my first shaman that we bring to you. Axél is also married to a wonderful man, so he joins us as a member of the community. So welcome. It is such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. I love being here. I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah. So I introduced you a little bit, but do you just want to share a little bit more about you, your background, anything at all you think would be interesting?
Yeah, for sure. I primarily today teach a form of shamanism called Antahai, and it's like a very powerful language that anyone can learn. It's super easy to do. It's like 12 steps. And once you're in the program, you basically start learning how to like develop your psychic abilities, how to heal other people, how to really rapidly manifest things that you're looking for. And my journey that led me up to discovering Antahai is like pretty powerful. Like I was born into a family of shamans that had been doing it for like thousands, like hundreds of years. I'd say hundreds, but we say thousands. And I learned with the best people, like people who, you couldn't find on the grid. They were just like people part of my community. They taught me anything from like fortune telling to, traveling to other universes and stuff like that. So I grew up really kind of like learning that half of the world, but then my parents also had stepped into like Christianity at some point. So I kind of had to like learn both aspects. And when I finally turned about like 16, I was given the choice to like figure out, do I want to be a shaman or do I want to be like a Christian? And one of the main things that really determined what was going to be the vibe for me was the fact that when I came out, my parents who are Christian really had a hard time, like even being humane about it. Where my grandparents who were shaman, they were like, yeah, whatever, like we've already known, no big deal. That's like, what are we going to have for dinner? Right. So when I had that experience, that kind of like sold it for me. I was like, okay, shaman people are just like super chill. They don't give a shit about anything. They give a shit about stuff, but they don't give a shit about like the most basic things that the world is like constantly focusing on. So I dedicated the next couple of years just kind of like really studying different forms of shamanism. And I remember like throughout that process, I was working on so many different things with different people from all walks of life. It really didn't matter if they were trying to find their sexuality, if they were trying to heal from, deep personal trauma with their family, or they were just trying to get past like some sort of other mental psychic barrier that was there. So it was a pretty cool ride going through that. And I remember I left my shamanic community because they were like, oh, you're going to go out into the world and no one's going to really get it. So, you shouldn't even waste your time going out into a world that doesn't understand shamans. And I basically was like, how are people going to know what shamanism is or like what true spirituality is if we're not out there, like being the face of it all? Because at that time too, when I had gotten out of the colonies, there were a lot of like scam artists when it came to like psychic mediumship and stuff like that. So I really took upon myself to like go out into the world, define my elders and say, okay, I'm going to be like the face for what authentic energy work and shamanism really, really is in the world. And that's kind of like what took off my career. It started off slowly in Detroit. And then around like when I was about 24, I had a really serious PTSD accident. And it pretty much left me bedridden and I couldn't feed myself or eat or anything like that. And I remember after being like that for like 6-7 months, I got to a point where I was like, universe, if this is my life from now on, I just don't want to live this life, because I used to be really energetic, really social. Everyone loved me. I had all these different projects going on. So I'd even lost like several businesses because I was an entrepreneur then. And I got to that point where I was like, fine, I'm ready to forfeit my body. And you know how everyone tells you usually, you see the lights right before you're about to cross over to the other side. I saw those lights, and like right at the last, like probably 30 seconds before I crossed that light, I was like, okay, but universe, if the answer is just here, if the answer exists, but it's just not in the physical realm, I'm willing to go wherever I need to go get that answer so I can be the person that I know I'm supposed to be, that I've always been. And then I immediately was like going in this direction, and I got pulled to like a hard right. And I went to other dimensions. And during that time, for like the next 6 months in Earth years, I was in another dimension, pretty much learning like cultures there, people there, how the dynamics of like the subconscious work. I learned so much stuff in a short amount of time. And what was really cool was I was meeting these gods that I had never read about or anything like that. But when I came out of like that slumbery state that I was in, and I started doing research, and I said, okay, let me see if I can find a guy who has a disc on his finger or that's blue or whatever. Turns out to be the god Vishnu. And I'm like, oh my God, like these beings are legit, right? So that kind of like was a big part of like my spiritual awakening. And after I had like met certain kind of characters in those other dimensions, because I had learned like other dimensions are just like other countries with their own like systematic way of doing things. And I would become really good friends with particular ones, and they would give me like a keychain. And after I had like 6 or 7 keychains, they were like, okay, go back now and start using it on people. And I was mind blown, because I was like, okay, I'm bedridden. I can't even feed myself or anything like that. And you want me to go out and teach this to people? Like, if that was your intention from the get-go, like you gave it to the wrong person, right? And they were like, no, shut up, just fucking go back and just use it, just see what happens. So I started noticing that my PTSD, once I came back from that really deep travel, was starting to reverse itself. And then I was like, wow, this is really weird. Like I can finally eat. I can go to the bathroom. I can do all these things. Let me see what happens if I test it on other people. And it started off with my friends and my family, and they started reporting crazy ass experiences. Rather, they were manifesting super fast, or a phantom pain that they had been dealing with for a long time, just randomly just disappeared. And after I had probably like 10 to 20 of those experiences, I was like, okay, let me just make a Craigslist ad and see whoever just wants to show up at my shop. I'll give you a free healing, 90 minutes. I'm just going to record the whole entire thing, and we'll see what happens, right? The most it can't hurt you, because I won't be doing anything. So people showed up, I don't know how, from all over the world. They found me, and that's when I started seeing like, whoa, this is part of my like sole purpose here. And I had people from like psychosis, like phantom pains, cancer, autoimmune disorders, all these different things, just randomly lay on my bed for 90 minutes. I was just pumping in the energy, sitting like this in a corner, and I wasn't saying anything to them. And they would get up with wild experiences, that they went to another dimension, that they saw their dead mother, like they got all these answers that they've been looking for the last 20 years. I remember particularly one story. This lady got up and she was like, oh my God, I feel like I've had 20 years of therapy in 90 minutes, and I've been going to actual psychologists for the last 20 years. Like, I don't understand how this is working. And she was like, I actually feel like I found the answers I've been trying to look for the last 20 years when in this 190-minute session. And I was like, okay, cool. So after I did a lot of that, a lot of healing, and I kind of like did this really extensive research on like, okay, how to like break down cancer, how to break down, autoimmune disorders and stuff like that, and how to actually create prescriptions with this energy work. I went out and I wanted to teach people about psychic abilities, and that was a whole new story. So at the end of the day, we ended up realizing that Antohai literally rewires your subconscious mind with a brand new language, and that allows you to bend reality and your psychic abilities all at once. So like, it's the ultimate shamanistic technique, and you can find it in all other techniques, which is really weird, but also super cool. So now a lot of what I do is I focus with, private clients, celebrities. I also do like regular people. I do like lab work as well, because a lot of what we're trying to do now is just improve medicine as a whole. Like there's other ways to treat people without having to take prescription drugs, or, doing really, really invasive type work. Like it really all comes back to energy. If you get to the core of what the energy is manifesting, right? If you have cancer, there's an energy that's manifesting that cancer. And let's find that energy first. And if we can shift that, whether it's an emotion, a thought, or a circumstance that's somewhat like not correctly coded in your DNA, we can do that with energy work, and then your cancer will just disappear. So that's kind of like what I do. And like, I love it. Now we're in 150 countries all around the world in like 50 different languages. So yeah, it's been a pretty cool project in the last 5 years that's grown.
One of the things I have come to really sincerely enjoy about you is how unapologetic you are with like leaning into the, I'm going to call it woo, leaning into the like the explicitly spiritual. Like I'm somebody who always feels very guarded around like saying anything that sounds like, oh, it has to sound very practical. I can't sound too out there. And I so admire you and individuals like you. I said you when we met that you remind me a little bit of like reading Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahamsa Yogananda. And so I absolutely love that, and it definitely inspires me. Um, Two things that came up for me while you're talking that I would love for you to touch on. You shared your experience with your parents and your grandparents, and how your grandparents, the shamans, were very accepting of your sexuality, which I also relate to. My grandparents were a lot more open about it than my parents were when I came out. But how, for you, do you find the intersection between queerness, gayness, and spirituality? And also with that, can you talk a little bit about how many people experienced a spiritual path and their sexual identity as being in conflict, and how you see those things working together, that you can be spiritual and be gay? And then the second thing that came up for me that I would love to hear you talk about is you went through this tremendous experience with your health and your body, spending 6 months in bed, and reaching the point where you felt that you were ready to leave this life, ready to transition. I know for myself and other people who are on a spiritual path, that's a very common story of reaching that point of death, reaching that point of, I lost everything, I'm ready to go, I'm on the precipice of leaving this world, whether that's energetically or physically. And that being part of the initiation into deep spiritual work is to reach that point. Do you feel that's a necessary point that a lot of people have to go to? Do you feel that's something unique to certain people? But it's an element that comes up in a lot of people's stories.
Yeah. Okay, so trying to think if I should answer the second question first or the first one. I guess I'll answer the second just because that one's so close. I don't feel like people need to go through that intense of a spiritual awakening. I think it happens to specific people because of your power. That's at least what I've learned training lots and lots of shamans all around the world. It's just like the most powerful shamans and psychics, whatever you want to call it, are the people who've had the most intense stories. Like, and what I've learned from it is because since we come, like we architect what's going to happen to us before we step into this life, and we don't control every little factor, but we say, okay, like at these pivotal points, this event's going to happen to rather break me out of my shell if I haven't done it prior to that check mark, or allow me to like just understand more of who I am, right? So I realized that I've had multiple awakenings throughout my life. And the only times I've had a difficult awakening is when I've been extremely resistant to what's the most obvious thing in front of me, right? And that's what most people will notice. Is like an awakening can be super pleasurable. Like I have a lot of awakenings on probably like a weekly basis where I'm like, oh shit, like that's how the universe is wired. Oh my God, I never even thought about this one other thing. Whoa, I've been dealing with this one other project for like the last year and a half, and now it's coming full circle, right? Like you can have those awakenings because you're doing the work, you're living that lifestyle. A lot of times people think like shamanism and energy work is like this thing that you just pick up every once in a while, especially when you're going, like similar to praying, right? Like most people pray to God when they're going through some serious shit, like, oh my God, like I can't pay my bill, God, please show up. And oftentimes they'll take it lighter when everything's going good. They don't pray to God as often. They don't show as much gratitude to God. And that happens with your own energy work. Let's take away God from the equation, right? Like if you think about energy is everything, energy is a lifestyle. And like your consciousness is everything. Your consciousness is lifestyle. The moment you're not working, showing gratitude, or being real with yourself, you're becoming stagnant. The moment you become stagnant, the cosmos is still moving around you. It doesn't care if you choose not to move forward. But there's going to come a point where the change of the cosmos is going to come into collision with your own stagnation, and it's going to force you to do something about it. Rather, that creates a ton of chaos to make you like make it a massive change, or the chaos is there just to kind of like be integrated as part of your life. The universe doesn't really care whether you live a positive or negative. It cares about its alignment with all the other things that are happening in the co-collective consciousness, right? So that's kind of like where like spiritual awakening can be really intense. And then I'll give you a great example. Like I was married to somebody prior to my PTSD experience, and I knew he was a narcissist. I knew he was a bad person for me. Like he's not a bad person, but I knew it was like the mix was a bad thing, right? And I knew that before I got married to him. And I still was like, oh, you know, he doesn't have anybody. I don't have anybody. Like maybe this is why we came together. Like I do love him more than anybody else. And I had all these different signs along the way before I got married, when I got married, after, like when I was having to have my suspicions that he was cheating on me and doing all these other things, you know. And even when we were deciding to get divorced, I still didn't want to let it go. The whole experience caused so much chaos that I lost my business. I was institutionalized. I was put into a freaking psychiatric ward, not because I had lost my mind. It was because I kept denying my truth. And that was like the main topic that kept coming around during that time, was like that Taoism was really intense, like go with the flow. Like you're going against the order of nature was like the main topic that was everywhere around me during that time. And I realized, okay, I'm not living in harmony with myself, being in this really toxic relationship, right? So when I decided to let him go, all these doors opened up for me. So yeah, and that's kind of like what happens for everybody. You know, you got to just make sure that you're being honest, you're being real when the signs are there, and it's difficult to make the choice. Just make the choice anyway. It's gonna pay off faster. The second was that?
I can comment on that real quick. Like I think that's it's such a difficult and important part of life that we all have to struggle with, which is, you know, hindsight is 2020. We can look back and say, oh, I should have made this choice. I should have made this decision. All the signs were there. But when we're in the moment, we feel such conflicting desires. So like you're saying, I'm lonely and I love this person. Why aren't we just together? At the same point, you also recognize it's not the best relationship for you, and how common that is for us in many different aspects of life, whether that's relationships or our career or life's purpose, and saying, I'm getting one message but I'm also getting another and I don't know which one to listen to, and how it really does take time to get that clarity, and how it takes experience and trying things to get that clarity. And you could make a choice and it starts off really great, and then a few months, few years go by and you're like, that wasn't the right choice. I need to course correct. So I think it's really valuable to affirm that even somebody like you, somebody who's very spiritually in tune, somebody who's very energetically aware, still says, I made choices that were not the best possible choices, and I learned and grew from them.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing. Like, I think a lot of times people think about, you know, shamans that are at the forefront, like teaching other people, as like, we don't make mistakes. Like we totally make mistakes all the time, whether it's our own character development or how we treat other people in our world. You know, like I know one of my issues is like, I don't always express love all the time. Like I grew up in a culture where like I had to be like very like self-sustainable, and like me kind of like opening up my love with other people sometimes is difficult, and I'm aware of it. I'm working on it all the time. I'm forcing myself to live a lifestyle where I have more love, but like everyone's got their thing and like no one's perfect. That's why we came to this dimension, to kind of like see the imperfections that we don't have anywhere else, right? Because like if we were part of the cosmos in a way, we would be in complete and total harmony with ourselves. We would be in that perfect state. So no, for sure. And then like that's the other thing too, like when you go into those experiences where like you're getting one message and then you're getting another, it can feel like your mind is being like torn apart, because it's the emotion of the ego and like the celestial consciousness of like the universal mind that's saying like they're competing with each other. And that's what the great awakening is. Like, I mean, it's really coming down to your truth. And it, even though it can be confusing, you need to understand that like the only thing that's going to really make it better is being brutally honest. And like most people are afraid of the truth, unfortunately. And it's an inherent thing that happens to all of us because we're given a program, you know, like an ego when we're born, and we kind of like adapt to it, we modify it, we then subscribe to it. And then no one really teaches you how to unsubscribe from your ego and then choose another one that might be even better than you. That's like the whole concept of like quantum shifting and quantum jumping is like most people don't see it as like you're basically switching out one ego for another ego. They see it as like you're jumping from one universe to the other universe. But the you in another universe has a totally different frequency and belief system than the previous you or the current you, right? So you literally are changing your ego as though you're changing soul fragments. And you have to be willing to do that and recognize that, okay, if I feel like I don't want to be at this job anymore because it's draining me, or I used to have fun coming to work and now it's just like it's a struggle to even get out of bed, that's a sign. That's like a physical sign from your body, from the cosmos. You might even notice that when you show up to work, like your coworkers are even nastier after some time with you because they're responding off of your energy. Those moments are like where you're like, okay, I have to make a choice to love myself, number one, and to be brutally honest with myself that I'm going to quit this job. You know what I mean? That's where it basically comes down to.
And with that, you
And
also just perfectly explained the entire plot of the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is fabulous. If you haven't seen it, you should watch
I
it.
haven't seen it yet. I was going to watch it like 2 nights ago, actually. So, hey, um, coming back to like the spirituality, like your first question, I think being a gay person is the shamanic experience itself. You can't avoid it no matter what happens. When people come out of the closet, like that's an awakening. That's a spiritual awakening. You're literally saying you're going to abandon an old version of yourself that everyone's been comfortable with. And you know, it might even bring some shit along with it, but you're still going to do it because you choose to be honest with yourself, right? And like, you can't be living this life. You choose to deal with whatever adversities will come with it because you are essentially pursuing happiness. And I think that's why there's been so much like resistance towards like gay people and like gay culture and all these other things. It's because like they're naturally more imbalanced. We're naturally more imbalanced with like the divine feminine, divine masculine. Even if you identify more as one than the other, like we all have a little bit of it in that in us, and we have the fluidity of doing that. And that's what you need to be able to do the most basic of shamanism, is to see the positive and the negative, the duality, the gender and everything. And that's like in one major alchemy book that everyone will touch eventually. It's called the Kabbalion. Like that's one of the laws that's in there. There's like duality and everything. So spiritual people, I mean, spirituality itself is just so powerful because not only do you have to like let go of what society thinks of you, what your parents think of you, what, and you go through a death. Like I remember when my husband had come out the closet, like he was in the closet till he was probably like 30. And when he met me, we dated for like a year. And I basically told him, hey, like, I love you. I think you're dope and I don't want to go anywhere, but I'm going to be 100% honest. I can't be with somebody who's in the closet like this. I can't be your secret, right? Because ultimately you're not being real with yourself. And I'm not helping you by supporting you doing this, right? And I understand we all have stories. I'm not telling you to do anything that you don't want to do, but I can't be part of the picture. This is how it's going to roll out, right? And he was like, he mustered whatever he had to make a conscious decision. Do I love Axél more than I love like pretending to be this person that I've always been? I love Axél. I don't want to lose Axél. I'm going to make the shift. And oddly enough, like it, like not oddly enough, but like surprisingly enough, his family was totally cool with it. Like they were shocked, of course, but they were like, okay, if this makes you happy, you know, like we've known you for such a long time, follow your vibe. So it kind of like happens with everything that we do. And also the discovery in gay culture is also super opening, where a lot of hetero people don't end up going through it the same way that we do, because you know we not only have all these like little cliques that we can dive into, but we also have all the sexual options, right? There's so much, like I feel like there's more options with two guys than there is obviously like with straight people. And I'm not saying like you can't have amazing sex, but the openness even to like explore a little bit more is naturally there. And like yeah, there's just so much beauty. I think there's a lot of stuff I can go into. I don't really know
No,
if I've covered it.
you bring up for me too. One of the things that I look at is I was saying this to someone yesterday. Like you look at like what are some of the mainstays of what we call typical gay culture, partying, dancing, sex, chemical substance use. And you think that in their own ways, each of those things have been taken and brought into a secular context, but they also have a spiritual context. Like there is, spiritual sex is a form of transformation and connection. The temple prostitute, using substances to alter your consciousness, entering a trance-like state through dance and drumming and music. Like everything that is part of gay culture, one could say is people who are inclined to a deeply spiritual, ecstatic, transcendent experience, who don't necessarily know that's what they're looking for, but still have the trappings of it because that's what we energetically are drawn to.
Absolutely. And I think what's taken me like a long time, well, what took me a long time to understand was that spirituality and religion are two different things. Like being spiritual, being religious are two different things. And then there are people who transcend spirituality where it's no longer like this idea that you're trying to connect with. It's just life itself, right? And like I think that's what's really cool about being queer, being gay in general, is that you have the fluidity to actually change at any moment. And like the thing is, like, you're so used to changing, like that it's easier for a queer person to make the shifts that they need to make than usually a hetero person, because like even if you say sexually, right, like there are times, like there might be seasons where you're a top and then all of a sudden you switch off and you're like your verse, and then you switch off again a couple months later and you just want to be a bottom. Like this being able to switch that personality trait inside of you and that characteristic will make it even easier for you later on when you're like, you know what, I want to walk away from the shop. And I have so many friends that are like that, like that if something just does not work out for them, they're going to go with that intuitive impulse and just be like, whatever, I'll figure it out later. And I think that's why also, like, we're seen as rebellious in a way, because we're not willing to conform to like the status quo just because it's there. Like we'll work with it, but it's not going to be the law, you know? Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
You do a lot of work with people and helping them to cultivate energetic awareness, their spiritual abilities, their psychic abilities. Does everybody have them? Are all gifts to some degree approachable by all people, whether you're, very adept at it or not? We all have our inclinations, but what is everybody's connection to spiritual abilities? And if they're so inclined, how do they cultivate them?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So what I teach is called, one of the classes I teach is called Metaphysical Naturalism, which takes the concept that like you're naturally metaphysical. Everything is energy. Like you are naturally right now have the ability to talk to somebody across the world without your cell phone. Because telepathy is a thing. We're all one organism when it comes down to like all esoteric. We even see like the universe itself. Like right now, everything I'm saying is vibrating and changing something in the cosmos up top, because vibration and sound is also a part of energy. So we're really heavily connected with everything that's going on. So the moment that you change, you have to first change this idea that like you're trying to get spiritual powers or you're trying to become psychic, because that's a lie. That's going to be like a trap in itself. You're always trying to overcome the space and the time that it is required for you to become psychic. The first thing you change is like, okay, I was born naturally psychic. I have these abilities at my fingertips. I don't have to do anything to acquire them. I just have to become more aware of them. I have to like practice them, essentially. Similar to like if you haven't used your arm for like 20 years and then all of a sudden you find mobility, like you're not going to be picking up a dumbbell out of nowhere and just start lifting weights. Like you have to take your time and start articulating your fingers, articulating the arm, and then eventually get to like doing weights, right? So the same concept happens with you there. Like you first have to see the option that it's much more easier than you ever believe. Now, there are specific abilities that come first to a person based off of your anatomy. So like, some people find it easier to run. Some people are naturally really great runners, and some people have cultivated themselves to become great runners. You have the same thing with all spiritual abilities. Some people are really clairsentient, which is like they just know things randomly and they're usually really right. by birth. And some people notice that they can tap into that, and then they cultivate into becoming a clairsentient person. So no matter what it is that you want to tap into, you can always tap into it really easily, as long as you're aware that you have that ability. Every power has a specific law or virtue that is associated to it. So for instance, if you want to be able to see into the future and you want to be able to read people's subconscious minds, like they're talking to you like we are right now, you have to embody all levels of truth, no matter what it is. Like that means you have to be willing to look at a timeline that potentially makes you feel really uncomfortable. Like you could see the end of the world and you're like, shit, if that's in the timeline, that is what it is, right? That level of truth. But you also have to be willing to understand that if you're going to tap into like telepathy, you're going to hear shit that you don't want to hear from your friends. Like your friend might tell you, oh yeah, I love your dress, but in their unconscious mind, they're like, you look ratchet as fuck, but I can't tell you that because it's going to hurt your feelings. You know what I mean? So you have to be willing to hear that and then not confront the person when you heard that second voice, because they're not telling you consciously because they think you can't hear them, right? So in a way, you're almost violating their privacy by holding them accountable for that, but you can work with the person to shift that element out of their habits, right? So yeah, when like one of the first ways that I tell people to like really tap into what their main ability is I want you to imagine like a yellow ball in front of you, right? And really textualize that ball. You want to make sure it's really bright yellow. You can see the curvature in the ball. It's so real that you can see it right in front of you. If you can really visualize that, then you're clairvoyant. That means that you can see through like timelines, you can see into the future, you can see that if that's a really detailed thing. Now, if you imagine that same ball and then you can feel the edges of it, the texture on the actual ball, what even might like the temperature of it is as well, then you're becoming a little bit more cognizant, clairsentient, where you're able to like pick up on more profound information. Now, the other thing that I then tell people is go ahead and imagine the time where you really fell in love with somebody and what was that feeling and like how like deep it was and like how it made you think. If you can really immerse yourself on that time where you fell so in love, right, and you can really emulate that, then you have the ability to basically interpret things through emotions. Like that's a psychic power itself. Like a lot of my psychic friends, they can't see into the future, they can't do anything like that, but they just feel things. So they'll automatically feel like, oh shit, something bad is about to happen, and like a day later something happens around the world or something like that. Not everyone is going to have the same abilities. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of like a good way to dive into it. If you give me a couple other questions, I guess I can hyper detail it if you want me to.
Well, if someone wants to work with you, do you want to talk about what the process is like and what they would expect? I think mainly it's online training programs, right? Like, I don't know if you're doing things in person or how that works right now for you.
Yeah, so like what I do is like I filter almost everyone. If you're going to be working with me one-on-one, like I have to filter you because I want to see like where you're at. Some people are just not ready to dive into their spiritual abilities because they're really afraid. Like you can't go into wanting to be able to travel to other worlds and then have the fear of getting on the plane. You know what I mean? Like you can't, that's just not how it works. So the first thing I do is like I really like just kind of like get a feel for you if you're going to be working with me. And then I teach you the first major law, which is time and space isn't real. Like I literally get you to master it to the point where you can what a trip normally would take you 40 minutes and all of a sudden it's taking you 20 minutes. You didn't change your speed, you didn't do anything like that. You notice that a 30-minute time gap in your life feels like 3 hours and you got so much work done, right? And that's because time is a perception in your mind. Like that's why when you're having a lot of fun, time seems to like fly, or sometimes you even lose track of time because you're having so much fun. And vice versa, where like you can be in a dinner with your parents and you're like, oh my God, when is it going to be done? And like it drags out forever, right? So time is only this thought in your mind. And that's the first thing you got to really understand, because it's a manifestation. Time is not a law in reality, and a ton of different like quantum sciences have dived into this. And when you realize, okay, it's not real, that means you're manifesting time at any given moment just so you can understand what's happening chronologically from time to time. But if you look at how quantum science has, and shamans have even talked about time itself, like right now, all things are happening at once. Like the future you is happening right now, the past you is happening right now. Like you can influence anyone at any moment from any angle because it's all happening now. So once you kind of like learn how to bend time, and it's really easy, it sounds more complicated than it is, but I basically give you a symbol. That symbol is a letter which is in your brain somewhere, and when you turn on that letter, you start downloading instantly how to bend time, how to manipulate time, how time's been affecting your mind, and when you turn on just that variable, it cures anxiety, depression, any illness that's really deeply associated to time in the mind. It'll get rid of it, PTSD, whatever. Once you have acquired that, you start learning automatically how to bend space. So like you'll notice that you won't have to do things. Like one of my friends like mentioned it probably like 2 days ago. He was like, I've noticed that since the last like 7 years I've known you, you never leave your house to get anything you want. Like you literally just say, this is what I'm looking for. And somehow that will show up in your reality and you're just sitting on your couch. It's because space doesn't exist to me anymore. Like whatever it is that I want is literally right in front of me. It's just, I haven't become aware of it. So I'm ordering it in cosmic, Amazon, and telling it, okay, show up in 2 days or however long I need you, because I need it to just be part of my reality. Most people will start noticing how to do that. And then it's kind of hard to explain how space works, but eventually you'll realize that like you live in a hologram and everything around you is moving, but you're always stationary. So like you can go to Aruba right now, but you technically never left your living room, and you'll feel it. It's going to be like, oh wow, the illusion is real. But it's a really cool feeling. From there, I walk you into the ninth chakra. The ninth chakra is associated to your soul, and that's where you can not only access like all your past lives and stuff like that, but you can also like really kind of almost curtail you can like design a new soul for yourself that really, really fits all the dreams and desires that you've always had. When you're in that chakra as well, you're basically going to learn how to do telepathy automatically. You're going to learn that there's different types of telepathy. There's emotion to emotion, there's mind to mind, there's soul to soul, and there's spirit to spirit. So like you can acquire different levels of information from people, yourself, the world, from like those levels of consciousness. And it's really just becoming aware of them, right? Like if I show you this watch, right, you're going to become aware of this watch. Until the moment that I showed you that watch, it was there, but you just couldn't see it. So now that you can see it, it's like, okay, great. I can do something with it. I can touch it. I can move it. I can feel its texture. And that's really all it's about. Again, it's another letter that I would teach you. From there, I go into Mother Earth, which Earth is your body. Like a lot of people don't even look at it this way, but all shamanism is like, hey, without Earth, you cannot breathe. Without Earth, you wouldn't be here. So like Earth essentially is the main organ that controls your body. That's why you have to take care of it. That's why you have to learn how to talk to it. And through the 10th chakra, we end up learning how to talk to trees, animals, create really advanced herbalism, because the plants are telling you what you need. Once you're able to kind of like talk to Mother Earth, you're able to talk to your body really profoundly and each one of your cells. Coming back to Yogananda, Yogananda's been a huge influence in my life because he's taught me that every cell is a miniature version of you. So like, most people don't recognize that you're always manifesting with just your mind, but you're not manifesting with the billions and millions of versions of you that are existing just right here in your fingertips. Quantum science has shown us that like a gram of DNA is worth 3 terabytes of a hard drive. Like you're a walking computer, literally. And when you give consciousness to each one of your cells, you're a million minds focusing on a particular manifestation, and your whole body starts manifesting, not just your heart's desire. So like, that's another thing that like the 10th chakra will teach you. From there, we'll go into the 11th chakra, which is spirit, mind over matter. And this is where people really start getting like wild results. Doesn't matter what field it is, because you end up realizing, okay, your mind is so lucid. And shamans have always said, we live in a dream. This is a holographic reality. This is the matrix, whatever it is that you want to call it. It's not real. It has properties that you need to obey, physical laws like any other game. But a lot of it can be hacked with only being aware that it's an actual illusion. It's not like fixed reality. So at this point, you can start using like your mind to move spiritual energy. And this is the other thing that I teach my students is like, a lot of times people try to manifest things and they're manifesting matter. Like, I need the car. Ugh. Well, matter doesn't have any energy. Like Nikola Tesla literally wrote about this. Matter doesn't have any energy. The energy around the matter is what changes the matter into a specific format. So that's why when a lot of people are manifesting a car, it can take time and space because you're not doing it properly, right? If instead of saying, okay, I'm going to move the energy that would then manifest the car into place, that's a different way of thinking. And that's called the perception, right? For perception A is saying, I need the car. Perception B is basically saying, let's move the energy to manifest the car. That's where like you can do like miraculous healing where you can cure cancer in like 3 sessions or some shit like that. It's really powerful too, because it'll help you kind of like just reformulate like how the blueprints of reality. So like reality itself is a architecture. So it's got different blueprints for different people in different situations. And then eventually at the 11th chakra, mind over matter, you can read those blueprints and adjust them. So like, you notice that people are born with like, a severe ADHD condition or something like that. And they've tried everything and they can't get it out. Well, in the cosmic blueprint, that's what's been embedded there. So I can shut that off. And then all of a sudden your ADHD is gone, right? And it's different for each person. Like for some people, it's very like instantaneous. It's one shot and that's it. For some people, it'll shut off and then they turn it back on based off of like something called epigenetics, like their environment. So sometimes your environment will reprogram and reinstall something, even though you took it out just because you didn't change the external energy. At the 12th chakra, that's what's called universal consciousness in Tantra. And it's also like this like huge internet library thing where you can access the Akashic records. So at the 12th chakra, at that point, my students can really understand how to read the past, the future, people's lifetimes, trends, karma. Like you have a catalog of everything that's ever happened and you just open it. And this is all done by the chakra system too. Like, as you notice, like I'm talking about like the 11th and the 12th chakra and stuff like that. It's because most people are familiar and comfortable with the first 7. The first 7 are just about the material universe and your physical body. They're powerful. Then you need to understand them. But outside of your body, there's another 7, and those are the ones that shamans actually practice. And like people like Yogananda and all the massive gurus that have been able to do like miraculous events. Those higher chakras are the ones that are the most powerful for them because those are the ones that bend reality physically.
I love it.
Yeah.
Again, I love how unapologetic you are about saying all these things, and it definitely inspires me.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there anything else you really wanted to touch on or talk about, or anything you feel called to share?
Yeah, I mean, so lately I've been going through like this process of studying gay spirituality. Because I got to a point where I was like, okay, well, I feel like I'm missing something and I'm not really sure what it is. And I felt like it had something to do with my own personal like gayness. I'm super open. I don't care if you know I'm gay. I've done a lot of my personal work, but we all carry our own little like scars. And I asked the universe, show me if there's anything that I'm missing in terms of like gay shamanism. And it said, okay, cool. And I started learning that there's all these different gods in shamanism that are associated in all these different cultures that are associated to queerness or gayness, transgender, lesbian, and they're in all these places where you would never think that they are, like voodoo, Egyptian alchemy. There's a god for all gay men. There's a god for tops and bottoms and versatiles and sides and all this other stuff. And like you can really get into it and unlock more of yourself. And that's kind of like one of the things I've been really diving into because like gay spirituality has been a major topic because I've been like one of my friends most recently died right before he turned 30. And I kind of blame gay culture for it because he was part of the like he was one of those gay kids that didn't have somebody to mentor him or teach him more about like our history and about our spirituality. So like he only associated being queer with sex and drugs. And when I met him, like he was already like programmed, he already had his perception and stuff like that. And we tried to like really get him out of that lifestyle. And I remember the last time we saw him, we were like, you got to slow down, like just slow down, just take a break, find some time for yourself. we had left, we went to Miami, and like on our way back from Miami, like we found out that he had died, actually not too far from our house. So it was kind of like this awakening process where I was like, wow, like this is crazy. And I remember I was like, if only maybe he knew that there was like a spiritual concept in all of this, maybe he wouldn't have relied so much on sex and drugs to like kind of find his own spiritual freedom. And I had this question where it was like, how many other gay boys, like little gay boys, are going to be fucking having the same event happen during Pride Month? Because it literally happened on the 1st of June. And I was like, wow, this is so intense. So like most recently, I found out that my nephew's gay. And I can see a lot of the trends with my friend and my nephew, where it's kind of like he's getting like really hypersexualized and stuff like that. And he's still very young. And I'm like, okay, well, I got to somehow, we all have to somehow make a change in how we even see queerness. Because like during Black History Month, you know, schools traditionally would teach you about the struggle of Black people in America and why this shit cannot happen again. And, you know, all the conditioning, the openness, right, of cultural change. We don't do that for LGBT month, right? And like it's just like Pride. And of course, like everyone should have fun and be happy, but there's more to it than just Pride Month and having fun, right? There's like the gay gods, there's the gay spells, they're the people who actually revolutionized history. And that somehow has to be the forefront of our culture now more than ever if we really want to progress. I feel personally as a culture, because right now we're given the label of a culture, but we're not behaving as every other culture that's been out there. And some people could say, oh, well, that is our culture, not to be like atypical or whatever, but no, to be typical, sorry. But that's kind of like where I'm at. I think there's a lot of spirituality that we can all dive into, and we need to make that the focal point.
And I think what's so hard too about that is any other minority group, you're born into it. So you have parents, you have grandparents who give you that culture. Being LGBTQ, you may have family members who are part of that culture, openly or not, but we don't receive it in the same way. And so it's something that ideally, yeah, we have our gay elders. Ideally, yes, we have those individuals, those mentors who help teach us. You know, I read a book recently called How to Be Gay, with that idea, like it's something that has to be learned. And it's also something I thought that me and my husband have commented on is, why are we not teaching LGBTQ history during Pride Month? Why are we not learning about these individuals who have helped us get to where we are today and have been trailblazers? Like, why is there not an educational component?
I really think that comes down with any other like minority suppression, because wisdom, knowledge is power, right? Like, so if you know more about yourself, like especially when you do like gay shamanism, you dive into it, like you see like other, like until Western culture had come through, like and had influenced all these different aspects of the world, queerness was seen as like the ultimate spiritual experience, because you had the ability to embody the entire of the cosmos. And most cultures didn't even have a problem with it. That's why they had gods about it. They had a specific structure for us in society because of like how they revered us or they saw us in specific ways. But it wasn't until Western culture really kicked in, and some more imperialistic cultures really kicked in, that they started changing the narrative on how we were seen. So of course it's going to be one of those things where if you don't give the opportunity for people to really learn this, you're never going to fully step out of a specific framework that they were programmed in. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Axel, I so love your perspectives. I so love your storytelling. I love how you communicate and share yourself and your energy and your heart. Thank you so much for taking time to have this conversation with me today.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to engage with you, how should they connect with you in your work?
Yeah. So I have a gay shamanism Instagram. It's called Gay Spiritual Healer. So definitely go check that out. I post some really cool stuff on there. My actual Instagram page is at Antohai, and you can always shoot me a DM there if you want to, like, you know, learn more about whatever I have to offer, set up a one-on-one session. I do one-offs, and I also have my school. So anything from energy healing, psychic readings, even like shamanic training I do. And my website is antohai.us. So you can work with me directly, or you can work with one of my graduates that I've taught. And there's a couple of them when you go to the website as well, if somebody else resonates a little bit more with you. The most important thing that we want to do in our mission here at Antohai is to teach everybody Antohai, because Antohai means the cravings of life. So we just want to give you back the power to create the life that you really wanted to create in the most magical way, the most magical way possible, because all I want you to do is be happy. So that's it.
That's a very worthy goal. Well, I'll drop those links in the description below. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for listening and engaging today. So much love and blessings to you.
Yeah. Bye. Thanks for having me.